There is perhaps no other country on earth more identified with its cuisine than Italy. Just hearing the name Italy makes us hungry for pizza, pasta, and Parmesan. Food has always been an integral part of Italian culture, ever since medieval times when wealthy Italians built literal towers of edible delicacies and watched as hungry peasants fought each other for scraps, all for their twisted amusement. Today, we're going to see how rich people in Italy used food to watch poor people fight over their scraps. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what other sick and food historical topics you would like to hear about. Okay, after that antipasti, now for your il secondo. From heaven to cloudy with a chance of meatballs, we wish for food to be raining down from the sky. In fact, in medieval Europe, many stories were written about the Land of Cockaigne, a wondrous place where houses were made of barley, sugar, and cakes, and cheese rained down from the sky. Like the mythological cities of Atlantis, El Dorado, and Tampa, Florida, Cockaigne was a utopia. Streets weren't lined with gold, but paved with pastries. In a parody of the Christian concept of heaven, the Land of Cockaigne was thought of as a place where idleness and gluttony were not deadly sins. Instead, they were the noblest of attributes, and really full-time jobs. Cockaigne was thought to be a place of abundance, and not just when it came to food. Famed historian Herman Pleij described Cockaigne as a place where roasted pigs wander about with knives in their backs to make carving easy, where grilled geese fly directly into one's mouth, where cooked fish jump out of the water and land at one's feet. The weather is always mild, the wine flows freely, sex is readily available, and all people enjoy eternal youth. But before you jump on kayak trying to book a trip, you should know the Land of Cockaigne only exists in works of fiction, which is why medieval Italians took it upon themselves to build the next best thing. The English word carnival is related to the Italian word carnivale, which is related to the Latin words carnem levare, which means taking meat away. Early Christians would abstain from eating meat for the 40 days leading up to Easter. Today, we know this as Lent, but what they couldn't eat in meat, they made up for with everything else. Carnival feasts were always an integral part of the culture of Naples. Every Sunday, the devout, and presumably those just out looking for a good meal, were greeted with delicacies of bread and cheeses, fruit, vegetables, and sweets from all over the region. Parade floats called Cuccagna were meant to elicit feelings of abundance, harkening back to the mythical Land of Cockaigne. These Cuccagna were built by the various food guilds, consisting of artisans like bakers and cheesemakers from all over the city. They decorated these floats with their wares, knowing that showing off their food on a float was great for business. Just like how the Goodyear blimp is great for tire sales, despite the fact that blimps don't actually have tires. Everything was going fine with these festivals featuring the Cuccagna until 1734, when an 18-year-old Spanish prince with no military experience marched an army into Naples, captured it from the ruling Austrians, and crowned himself king. King Carlos Borbone, also known as King Charles III, was eager to show his new subjects that he knew how to party. So when Carnival came around, the Bourbon King took it to an 11. Besides adding meat back into the mix, he ordered the construction of new Cuccagna, single-serving structures made to resemble small palaces, statues, and temples. These Cuccagnas would not be floats, but stationary structures, partially made of and heavily decorated with the finest delicacies imaginable. These tasty towers of meat, cheese, produce, and sweets were hastily constructed and donated throughout the city. Quickly constructed structures made of food. What could possibly go wrong? Picture this. Hundreds of Italian soldiers on horseback hold back the ravenous mob outside the Largo del Castello. A cannon fires from the Castel Nuovo. It's the proverbial starting pistol, signaling the throngs of desperate Nepalese poor to descend upon the Cuccagna. An older man stumbles. The crowd can't stop, and he is crushed to death under the stampeding masses as they scramble to strip away as much meat and cheese as they can stuff into their pockets, mouths, or any other orifice. Meanwhile, the wealthy elite watched from their towers, chuckling at the grotesque spectacle below. This was typical during Carnival for those participating in the looting of the Cuccagna, the largest of the Cuccagna festivals in Naples. Literally, it was the Hunger Games. And like the Hunger Games, it was conducted mainly for the sadistic amusement of the rich, who got their jollies watching the underclasses fight each other for enough food to feed their families. Occasionally, Cuccagna celebrations would feature live animals as part of their food displays. And if it wasn't kooky enough to have peasants fighting each other for coveted food scraps, they would also have to kill the animals, as if they were on some kind of manufactured battlefield. The live animals often included bulls, freely running through the streets, and birds, not so freely tied, or sometimes nailed, to the tops of trees. These trees became known as Cuccagna Trees. Their trunks were greased, so only the best climbers could make it to the top and claim their crucified poultry. Sometimes a climber would make it to the top of the tree trunk to find not a chicken, but a brand new suit. Fine clothing was often used as the prize for climbing the Cuccagna trees. Expensive hats, shoes, and jackets were fine trophies for those who could not normally afford them. Of course, sliding down a greasy tree with a new pair of slacks may have immediately decreased their value, and without a receipt, they probably couldn't be returned. The concept of greasing up a tree and trying to climb it to the top to win a prize spread well beyond the Cuccagna, and in many places around the world, it continues to this day. In Malta, a popular game involves a 65-foot-long wooden beam that is attached to a pier at an angle and extended over the sea. The beam is heavily greased and a flag is attached to its end. The aim of the game is to run to the end of the beam and grab a flag without falling into the ocean. And in the United Kingdom, a greasy pole game was an annual event at the Egremont Crab Fair up until 2004, when it became too expensive to insure due to participants constantly falling off the 35-foot vertical pole. The Egremont Crab Fair could have taken a lesson from King Charles III and just set up a fund for all the inevitable injuries and deaths that would occur. Stampedes and infighting aside, since people regularly brought knives to cut away the bread and cheese from Cuccagna walls, as well as spears to kill the bulls and other livestock, accidents were extremely common. So instead of canceling the game, good old Charles set up a fund for the widows and children of the men who would be killed or injured during the Cuccagna. It's as if instead of changing football rules to make it safer, we just set up a concussion fund for future injured players. And if you want to donate, please visit concussionfoundation.org. We're not affiliated, but seems like a decent cause. Now back to the games. The looting of the Cuccagna proved so popular that it was soon incorporated into celebrations like Saints' Days, royal birthdays, and weddings. But not everyone approved. In fact, the Marquis de Sade, the man for which the concept of sadism is named, was horrified by what he witnessed at a Cuccagna event in 1776. Mr. Sadism himself called the Cuccagna the most barbarous spectacle that one could imagine in the world. He claimed that one Cuccagna structure had been intentionally collapsed to make the game more challenging, and live animals cried in agony as they hung nailed to the display. The Austrian princess and sister of Marie Antoinette, Maria Carolina, expressed similar horror when she witnessed live animals being torn apart by a hungry mob at her wedding to King Ferdinand IV, who insisted on a Cuccagna. Performing the Macarena doesn't seem so horrific compared to that. As shocking as it may sound, not everyone at the Cuccagna events was sober. In fact, Cuccagnas frequently featured luxurious fountains spouting fine Italian wine. One such fountain was constructed for the birth of Prince Philip, the son of King Charles IV. Historical records indicate that Prince Philip was not all that impressed by the display. This was largely due to the fact that he was a newborn. The grown-ups, however, had a blast. And if you weren't all that into wine, you may have been in luck, because there were also rumors of folks diving into glorious amber lakes of beer. That gives a new meaning to the term beer goggles. Unfortunately, as the saying goes, all good and inhuman displays of conspicuous wealth must end. Despite the animal cruelty, human indignities, maimings, and deaths, the Cuccagnas remained extremely popular with both the commoners and elites alike. But in 1764, a famine came to Naples. That year, the Cuccagna event was particularly chaotic, as the hungry masses were, extra hungry. The starving peasants had the audacity to race towards the precious, life-sustaining food before they were given the official signal from their king. Very uncouth. Naturally, the elites decided that a Cuccagna they could not control was a Cuccagna not worth having. And soon, the practice, much like the Cuccagna structures themselves, just kind of disappeared. And so, the land of Cockaigne, home of gluttony, idleness, excess, and depravity, was once again relegated to live on only in our dreams. Oh, and in Vegas. It's basically just like Vegas. So what do you think? What food would you fight to the death over? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other videos from our weird history.